The underground chamber was filled with machines that looked like they were made from living crystal. Taemin moved around the room, touching different screens with his small claws, and each screen came to life, showing images and symbols that hurt Jinwoo's eyes to look at directly. The little dragon seemed to know exactly what he was doing, even though he had just hatched from his egg. Jinwoo sat down on what looked like a chair made from smooth purple stone. His broken arm was still throbbing with pain, but he was too amazed by everything around him to really notice. The walls of the chamber were covered with pictures that seemed to move like videos, showing dragons flying through space and humans working alongside them. Brother Taemin said in his sweet child voice, "I must tell you about our families and why you are here." The images on the walls changed to show a small blue planet that Jinwoo recognized as Earth. Many thousands of years ago, my people, the dragons of the royal house, made contact with your world. Jinwoo watched as the wall showed dragon ships landing on Earth. The humans in the pictures looked primitive, wearing simple clothes and living in small villages, but the dragons treated them with respect, sitting down to talk with human leaders around fires under the stars. Your people were special. Taemin continued, the dragons had great power and ancient knowledge, but we lacked something important. We could not adapt when things changed quickly. We could not survive in new places easily, but humans could do these things better than any other species in the galaxy. The pictures showed humans and dragons working together. Humans helped dragons build new kinds of ships that could travel to different types of planets. Dragons shared their knowledge of science and magic with humans who used it in ways the dragons had never thought of. The partnership made both species stronger and more capable, but the alliance was more than just friendship. Taemin touched another screen, and Jinwoo saw images of strange ceremonies where dragons and humans were connected by beams of light. The dragons used their advanced science to change human DNA, making certain bloodlines able to form mental connections with dragon partners. Your family name is not really Korean, Taemin explained. It is a shortened version of an ancient dragon house name. Your great-great-great-grandmother many generations ago volunteered to have her genetics changed so her descendants could serve as guardians and companions to dragon royalty. Jinwoo felt dizzy as he learned that everything he thought he knew about his family was wrong. The wall screens showed his family tree going back hundreds of generations. Each person in his bloodline had carried genetic changes that were waiting to be activated when they met their dragon partner. The quantum entanglement between our bloodlines means we are connected across time and space, Taemin said. Jinwoo could feel the truth of these words in his mind. He was starting to sense the little dragon's emotions and thoughts like they were his own feelings. The bond was growing stronger every minute they spent together. The screens changed to show darker images, dragons being hunted and killed by armored figures that looked like the overlords who had chased them. The dragon cities were burning and dragon eggs were being destroyed. The genocide had lasted for centuries, with the overlords systematically wiping out the dragon species. I am the last of the royal bloodline, Taemin said sadly. My parents hid my egg in this sanctuary and put me into a special sleep that would last until my guardian arrived. They died defending this place from the overlords, but their sacrifice kept me safe. Jinwoo reached out and gently petted Taemin's head. The little dragon closed his golden eyes and made a soft purring sound that made Jinwoo feel peaceful despite their dangerous situation. The mental connection between them was getting stronger, and Jinwoo could feel ancient memories starting to flow into his mind. Knowledge that had been locked in dragon DNA for thousands of years was now becoming part of Jinwoo's thoughts. He suddenly understood how to read the alien symbols on the screens. He knew how to operate starships that used technology far beyond what humans normally had access to. Most importantly, he could feel the locations of other survivors scattered across the galaxy. The overlords had thought they destroyed all the dragons, but some had survived by hiding in distant places. Some had disguised themselves as other species. Others had gone into deep sleep like Taemin, waiting for the time when it would be safe to return. The network of survivors was small, but it still existed. But there was more. The human bloodlines that had been bonded to dragons were still alive too. Most of them had no idea about their heritage, living normal lives on dozens of different worlds. But when the royal dragon awakened, all of their dormant genetic programming would start to activate. They would begin to remember abilities their ancestors had possessed. Jinwoo stood up and walked to one of the screens. His broken arm suddenly felt better, and when he looked down he saw that the cuts on his face were healing. The dragon bond was already changing his body, making him stronger and more resilient than normal humans. We have to find the others, Taemin said. The overlords have ruled the galaxy through fear. For too long, they steal power from other species and use it to maintain their empire, but they are not as strong as they pretend to be. Their power comes from the dragon essence they harvested, and that essence wants to return to its rightful owners. The screen showed a map of the galaxy with small lights scattered across it. Each light represented either a surviving dragon or a human with activated dragon bloodline genetics. The lights were dim and far apart, but they were there waiting to be contacted and organized into a resistance force. Jinwoo felt a strange sensation in his chest, like his heart was growing larger. The bond with Taemin was filling him with courage and determination he had never felt before. His boring life as a cargo pilot seemed like a distant memory. He was becoming something new, something that could challenge the most powerful empire in the galaxy. The overlords think they understand dragon power because they have stolen it, Taemin said, but they do not understand the partnership. The true strength comes not from taking power by force, but from sharing it willingly between species who trust each other completely. As if to prove this point, Jinwoo felt energy flowing through his hands when he touched one of the broken machines in the chamber. It immediately came back to life, humming with power. The machine had been waiting for someone with both human adaptability and dragon knowledge to repair it. Outside the chamber, Jinwoo could hear the overlords searching for them, but their hiding place was protected by technology that made it invisible to most scanning devices. Still, they both knew they could not stay hidden forever. The overlords had detected the royal awakening, and they would not give up easily. We need allies, Taemin said, and weapons and ships. The sanctuary has everything we need, but first we must learn to use our bond properly. If we are going to challenge an empire, we must become stronger than we ever imagined. Possibly. Jinwoo nodded, feeling ready for whatever came next. His simple life was over, but his real life was just beginning. Jinwoo had been flying cargo ships for 7 years, but nothing had prepared him for what happened that day. The warning lights on his control panel started flashing red and yellow like a crazy disco party. He pressed buttons and pulled levers, but nothing worked. The ship was shaking so hard that his teeth were chattering. The navigation computer was speaking in a language he had never heard before. Even though Jinwoo spoke Korean, English, and some Chinese, this new language sounded like someone was gargling water while trying to sing. The ship computer kept saying the same strange words over and over again until Jinwoo wanted to throw his coffee cup at the screen outside his window. Jinwoo could see a planet that looked like someone had covered it with giant diamonds. The whole surface was sparkling and shining with crystals that were bigger than buildings. Some parts of the planet were floating in the air like magic islands held up by invisible strings. The sight was so beautiful that Jinwoo forgot he was about to crash for a few seconds. Then gravity reminded him about his problem. The ship started falling faster and faster toward the crystal planet. Jinwoo grabbed the steering controls with both hands and tried to find a safe place to land, but everywhere he looked there were sharp crystal towers that would cut his ship into pieces. Like a giant blender, the crash was terrible. Jinwoo felt like he was inside a washing machine that was tumbling down a mountain. His cargo boxes flew around the cabin and hit him in the head and shoulders. The ship bounced 3 times on the crystal ground before it finally stopped moving. When everything was quiet, Jinwoo realized he was still alive, but his left arm was broken and he had cuts all over his face. Jinwoo crawled out of his broken ship and looked around. The crystal formations were even more amazing up close. They were making soft humming sounds, like a choir of angels singing very quietly. The air smelled like flowers after rain, but with a strange metallic taste that made his tongue tingle. He was trying to figure out how to call for help when he heard a sound that made him stop breathing. It was a soft chirping noise like a baby bird, but deeper and more musical. The sound was coming from somewhere behind a cluster of purple crystals that were taller than Jinwoo. Though his arm was hurting badly, Jinwoo followed the chirping sound. He walked carefully between the crystal formations because the ground was covered with sharp pieces that could cut through his boots. The chirping got louder as he got closer, and now it sounded almost like crying behind the purple crystals. Jinwoo found something that made his eyes go wide. There was a circular area that looked like a nursery with soft glowing moss covering the ground. In the center were dozens of large eggs that were bigger than footballs. Most of the eggs were cracked open and empty, but the shells were made of the same crystal material as everything else on the planet. One egg was still whole, and it was rocking back and forth like something inside was trying to get out. The chirping sound was definitely coming from that egg. Jinwoo could see cracks starting to form on the surface, and tiny flashes of golden light were leaking out through the cracks. Jinwoo knew he should probably leave the egg alone because it might be dangerous, but the crying sounds were getting sadder and more desperate. The creature inside sounded scared and lonely. Jinwoo had always been the kind of person who helped stray cats and lost dogs, so he could not walk away from something that needed help. He knelt down next to the egg and gently touched the surface. It was warm like a heating pad, and it pulsed with a soft rhythm like a heartbeat. Jinwoo found a small crack and carefully made it bigger with his good hand. The shell was thin and broke easily like an eggshell, but it sparkled with inner light. What came out of the egg made Jinwoo fall backward in surprise. It was a dragon, but not like the scary dragons in movies. This dragon was tiny like a house cat with scales that changed color from deep purple to bright silver. As Jinwoo watched, the little dragon had wings that looked too big for its body and golden eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. The baby dragon looked at Jinwoo for a long moment, then opened its mouth and spoke in perfect Korean. The voice was high and sweet like a child, but there was something royal and important about the way it spoke. Brother, the dragon said, tilting its small head to one side. Are you my brother who was promised to return? Jinwoo opened and closed his mouth like a fish out of water. He had seen many strange things in his years of flying between planets, but nothing had prepared him for a talking baby dragon who spoke Korean and called him brother. Before Jinwoo could ask any questions, the ground started shaking again, but this time it was not an earthquake. The crystal formations around them began glowing brighter and making alarm sounds like fire sirens. Jinwoo looked up and saw massive black ships appearing in the sky above them. The ships were so big they blocked out the sun and cast dark shadows over the crystal nursery. The baby dragon jumped up and grabbed Jinwoo's good hand with surprising strength for such a small creature. The dragon's claws were sharp, but they did not hurt Jinwoo. Instead, they felt warm and comforting, like holding hands with a friend. My name is Taemin, the dragon said quickly, and his golden eyes were full of fear. Those are the overlords. They have been hunting my family for many years. You must come with me now, or they will capture us both. Jinwoo wanted to ask a million questions, but the black ships were getting closer, and he could see armored figures jumping out of them with weapons that looked like they could destroy buildings. The figures were tall and moved in a way that seemed wrong, like they were not quite a Leviathan, and pulled Jinwoo toward what looked like a solid crystal wall. But when they got close, the wall opened up like a door, revealing a hidden tunnel. The tunnel was lit by the same soft glow that came from the dragon eggs. Jinwoo had to duck his head to fit inside, but Taemin scampered ahead on his four legs like he knew exactly where he was going. As they ran through the tunnel, Jinwoo could hear the overlords behind them making harsh sounds like metal scraping against stone. The sounds were getting closer, and Jinwoo realized that his quiet life as a cargo pilot was over forever. He was now a part of something much bigger and more dangerous than he had ever imagined. The tunnel seemed to go on forever, but finally they came to a large chamber filled with strange machines and glowing screens. Taemin touched one of the screens with his small paw, and suddenly Jinwoo could hear the overlords talking to each other in that same gargling language his ship computer had been using. The royal bloodline has awakened, one of the overlords was saying. We must capture the dragon prince and his guardian before they can reach the others. Jinwoo looked down at the little dragon, who was now his responsibility, and realized that his simple life was about to become very complicated indeed. Days passed in the crystal sanctuary while Jinwoo and Taemin learned to work together. The little dragon was growing fast, already twice the size he had been when he hatched. His scales were becoming brighter and his wings were getting stronger. Jinwoo could feel the dragon's growth through their mental connection, and it made him feel more alive than ever. Before, the sanctuary was much larger than Jinwoo had first realized. Tunnels and chambers stretched deep underground, filled with ancient dragon technology and weapons that had been hidden for centuries. Taemin showed him rooms full of crystal armor that adjusted to fit whoever wore it, and energy weapons that could cut through solid metal like butter. But the most amazing discovery was what was happening to Jinwoo himself. The genetic changes in his bloodline were activating in ways he had never expected. When he concentrated, he could make shields of pure energy appear around his hands. The shields could stop weapon fire and even deflect the claws of dangerous creatures. More importantly, Jinwoo found he could share his strength with Taemin through their bond. When the little dragon got tired from practicing his flying, Jinwoo could give him energy from his own body. In return, Taemin shared his enhanced senses, allowing Jinwoo to see in the dark and hear sounds from miles away. First real test came on the 7th day. Jinwoo was practicing with an energy sword in one of the training rooms when alarms started ringing throughout the sanctuary. The crystal walls lit up with warning symbols, and Taemin came running on his forelegs with his golden eyes wide with fear. Overlord scouts have found us, he said. They are trying to break through the outer defenses. The sanctuary shields are old and weak. They will not hold much longer. Jinwoo dropped the practice sword and ran with Taemin to the main control room. The screens showed 3 black Overlord ships circling above the sanctuary, firing energy beams at the crystal formations that hid their entrance. The ancient defense systems were fighting back, but sparks were flying from damaged control panels. Without thinking, Jinwoo placed his hands on the main control console and felt the sanctuary's systems connect with his mind. Through the dragon bond, he could see the entire defensive network like a map inside his head. Most of the weapon systems had been offline for decades, but the power sources were still working. Jinwoo closed his eyes and let his enhanced instincts take over. His hands moved across the control panels, activating systems he had never seen before. Energy flowed from the sanctuary's crystal core through weapons that had not fired in 200 years. Beams of pure white light shot up from hidden positions, striking the Overlord ships. The first ship exploded in a ball of fire, but the other 2 ships started firing back with heavier weapons. The sanctuary shook as energy blasts hit the crystal formations above. Then cracks appeared in the ceiling, and pieces of crystal started falling down around. Jinwoo and Taemin of the Overlord soldiers broke through the outer defenses and came charging down the main tunnel toward their control room. The soldier was 8 feet tall, wearing black armor that made him look more like a machine than a living being. His weapon looked like it could blow holes in mountains. Taemin jumped in front of Jinwoo and opened his mouth. Flames came out, not ordinary fire, but silver fire that burned cold instead of hot. The Overlord soldiers' armor started freezing and cracking, but he kept coming forward, raising his weapon to shoot. Jinwoo felt panic rising in his chest, but then the dragon bond flared to life. He could feel Taemin's determination and courage flowing into his mind, while his own human stubbornness and refusal to give up flowed into the dragon. Together they were stronger than either could be alone. Energy surrounded Jinwoo like golden lightning. He moved faster than he had ever moved before, dodging the soldier's weapon blast and getting close enough to touch the black armor. His energy shield expanded outward, surrounding both him and the Overlord soldier in a bubble of crackling power. The stolen dragon essence inside the soldier's armor recognized its true source and began flowing out of the artificial systems back toward Taemin and Jinwoo. The Overlord soldier stumbled and fell as his enhanced strength left him without the stolen power. He was just an ordinary being who had been following orders out of fear. The remaining Overlord ships retreated when they realized their soldier had been defeated, but Jinwoo knew they would return with more ships and stronger weapons. The sanctuary was no longer safe. They had to leave and find other survivors before the Overlords brought their entire fleet. As they gathered supplies and weapons from the sanctuary, Jinwoo noticed that the battle had changed both him and Taemin. The little dragon was now the size of a large dog, and his scales had patterns that looked like electrical circuits. Jinwoo felt stronger and faster, and when he looked in a mirror, his eyes had flecks of gold in them. The bond between them was no longer just mental. They were becoming something new, something that had never existed before in the galaxy. The combination of human adaptability and dragon power was creating abilities that surprised even them. Jinwoo could now fly short distances by sharing Taemin's wing strength, while Taemin could solve complex problems by accessing Jinwoo's human creativity. More Overlord ships were approaching the planet. When Jinwoo and Taemin finally left the sanctuary in a small dragon ship they had found in the deepest chambers, they could see the Black Fleet covering the sky like a swarm of angry insects, but they were no longer afraid. The awakening of their powers had shown them that the overlords were not invincible. Their empire was built on stolen strength, and stolen strength could always be taken back. Jinwoo piloted the ship toward the stars while Taemin used his inherited memories to navigate toward the first group of survivors. Behind them, the crystal planet grew smaller, but the sanctuary had served its purpose. It had kept the last dragon prince safe until his guardian arrived, and it had given them both the knowledge and power they needed to begin their fight for freedom. The real adventure was just beginning, and somewhere in the darkness of space, other dragons and humans were waiting to join their cause. Their first stop was a mining station orbiting a dead planet in the outer rim. Jinwoo had chosen this place because Taemin's inherited memories showed that several dragon-bonded humans had been relocated here by the overlords. The mining station was a perfect place to hide people who might have dangerous genetic traits. Because everyone assumed miners were too tired and uneducated to cause trouble, the station looked like a giant metal ring spinning slowly in space to create artificial gravity. Thousands of workers lived in cramped quarters mining rare crystals from the dead planet below. Most of them had been born on the station and had never seen a living world. The overlords kept them loyal by providing just enough food and entertainment to prevent riots. Jinwoo and Taemin docked their ship in the station's cargo bay, disguising it as a supply vessel. Taemin had learned to make himself invisible using dragon magic, while Jinwoo wore ordinary work clothes to blend in with the miners. The station was dirty and smelled like machine oil, but it was perfect for hiding. They found their first ally in the engineering section. Haijin was a young woman who had been working on the station since she was 16. Her grandmother had told her stories about flying dragons and magical powers, but Haijin had always thought they were just fairy tales meant to help children sleep. When Jinwoo approached her and mentioned her grandmother's name, Haijin dropped the wrench she was holding. The tool clattered on the metal floor, and she stared at Jinwoo with wide eyes that suddenly had tiny flecks of silver in them, just like his eyes had flecks of gold. My grandmother said someone would come someday, Haijin whispered, looking around nervously to make sure no one was listening. She said when the dragon prince awakened, the old bloodlines would remember what they really were. Jinwoo felt the familiar tingling sensation that meant he was near someone with activated dragon genetics. Haijin had been carrying dormant abilities her whole life, and now they were starting to surface. She could understand complex machines by touching them, and she had an instinctive knowledge of energy systems that amazed even the station engineer. Taemin revealed himself to Haijin in the privacy of her small quarters. The young woman fell to her knees when she saw the dragon, not in fear, but in recognition. Something deep in her genetic memory knew that this was what she had been waiting for her entire life. Within hours, Haijin had introduced them to 12 other workers who had been having strange dreams and unexplained abilities since Jinwoo and Taemin had arrived at the station. Most of them were descendants of dragon-bonded families, though they had no idea about their heritage. The group included mechanics, engineers, and even a few security guards who had been questioning why they were helping the overlords oppress their own people. Their first mission together was to rescue a group of dragon eggs that overlord scientists were studying in a research facility on the other side of the galaxy. The facility was heavily guarded, but Haijin had discovered its location by hacking into overlord communication networks using abilities she had never known she possessed. The rescue mission required careful planning. Jinwoo would infiltrate the facility disguised as a supply worker, while Taemin provided magical support from orbit. The newly awakened humans would use their enhanced abilities to disable security systems and create distractions. The research facility was a nightmare of sterile corridors and laboratories where overlord scientists experimented on captured dragon genetic material. Jinwoo felt sick as he walked through halls lined with cages containing creatures that had been twisted by unnatural experiments. The overlords were trying to create artificial dragons they could control completely. In the deepest level of the facility, Jinwoo found what they had come for. 6 dragon eggs were being kept in energy cages while machines drained their life force to power Overlord technology, the eggs were smaller than they should be, and their crystal shells were cracked from the abuse they had suffered. But worse than the eggs were the human prisoners. Jinwu discovered cells full of people who had been captured. Because they showed signs of dragon-bonded genetics, the overlords had been experimenting on them, trying to understand how the ancient alliance worked. Some of the prisoners had been driven insane by the process, but others retained enough of their abilities to be dangerous. When Jinwu began freeing the prisoners, he realized that some of them were much more powerful than he had expected. A man named Donghayan could project energy blasts that melted through metal walls. A woman named Sujing could become invisible and walk through solid objects. These people had been tortured for years, but their abilities had only grown stronger. The rescue became a battle when Overlord guards discovered what was happening. The facility alarms started screaming and armed soldiers poured into the corridors, but they were not prepared to fight people with dragon-enhanced abilities working together. The rescued prisoners fought their way to the surface, while Jinwu carried the dragon eggs to safety. Taemin arrived in their ship just as Overlord reinforcements were surrounding the facility. The little dragon had grown again during their time apart and was now large enough to carry Jinwu on his back. Together they loaded the eggs and prisoners into their ship and escaped into hyperspace. The rescued eggs began hatching during their journey back to the mining station. Each new dragon immediately formed a bond with one of the rescued humans, creating pairs that were even more powerful than Jinwu and Taemin had expected. The artificial enhancement experiments had actually strengthened the human genetics, making the bonds deeper and more complete. News of the successful rescue spread through underground networks across the galaxy. Dragons and humans who had been hiding for centuries began reaching out to join the growing rebellion. Mining stations, factory worlds, and agricultural colonies sent messages offering support and resources. The rebellion faced its first major test when Overlord fleets began attacking worlds suspected of harboring dragon sympathizers. The mining station where they had found their first allies was destroyed in a bombardment that killed thousands of innocent workers. The overlords were showing that they would commit genocide to maintain their power, but the attacks only strengthened the rebels' resolve. Each destroyed world brought more survivors into the growing resistance movement. The overlords' brutal response proved that they were afraid of losing control. For the first time in centuries, Jinwu found himself reluctantly accepting leadership responsibilities as more groups joined their cause. Taemin provided the royal authority needed to unite different dragon clans, while Jinwu's human pragmatism helped solve practical problems like logistics and strategy. Their biggest breakthrough came when they made contact with So Young, a dragon who had been hiding in plain sight for 50 years, disguised as a human merchant traveling between star systems. She had been gathering intelligence on Overlord operations and had identified crucial weaknesses in their seemingly invincible empire. So Young revealed that the Overlord Empire was not as unified as it appeared. Many subject species were only loyal because they feared punishment, but they would rebel if they thought there was a chance of success. The key was to prove that the overlords could be defeated and their stolen power could be returned to its rightful owners. The rebellion was growing from a handful of survivors into a legitimate threat to galactic order, but Jinwu knew their greatest challenges still lay ahead. The Overlord Emperor himself had not yet acted personally, and when he did, the real war would begin. The rebellion had grown beyond anything Jinwu could have imagined when he first crashed on the crystal planet. Hundreds of dragon-human pairs now worked together across dozens of worlds, creating a network of resistance that the overlords could not completely suppress. News of their victories spread through underground channels, inspiring oppressed species throughout the galaxy to dream of freedom. But their success had attracted the attention of the most dangerous enemy possible. Emperor Kangde had ruled the galaxy for over 500 years by absorbing the life force and power of every species he conquered. He was no longer entirely human or entirely any single species, but had become something monstrous that fed on the suffering of others. The Emperor's message reached them through every communication device in the galaxy simultaneously. His voice was like grinding metal mixed with the screams of his victims. As the ancient laws require, he announced, "I challenge the pretender To the dragon throne, to single combat, the winner will rule the galaxy, the loser will die, and their followers will be enslaved for eternity. Taemin had grown to the size of a small airplane during their months of fighting, but he was still young. Compared to the ancient powers the Emperor had stolen, Jinwoo had become stronger and faster than any normal human, but facing a being who had conquered the galaxy seemed impossible even with their bond. The challenge created a terrible problem. According to galactic law that was older than recorded history, the challenge had to be accepted or Taemin's claim to the dragon throne would be invalid. But the Emperor had spent centuries absorbing dragon essence from thousands of victims. He possessed powers that no single dragon had ever wielded. Their solution came from studying the oldest dragon texts hidden in the deepest archives of destroyed worlds. The ancient dragons had theorized about a complete merger between bonded pairs, where human and dragon would become a single being with the strengths of both species. The process had never been attempted because it was considered too dangerous. The merger ritual required a sacred space that could contain the massive energies involved. Fortunately, the rebellion had grown large enough to provide what was needed. Survivors from dozens of worlds worked together to construct a ritual chamber on a hidden moon using both dragon magic and human engineering. Merger was the most difficult thing Jinwoo had ever attempted. He had to surrender his individual identity and trust completely that he and Taemin would remain themselves even while becoming something entirely new. The process required him to open his mind and soul, completely allowing the dragon to merge with his deepest thoughts and memories. Taemin faced the same challenge. The young dragon had to give up his royal independence and accept that his future would forever be intertwined with a human partner. Neither of them could survive the merger if they held back even the smallest part of themselves. During the preparation, Jinwoo learned more about his own heritage than he had ever known. His family line stretched back not just to the original Dragon Alliance, but to an even older time when humans had volunteered to undergo genetic modification to save both species from an ancient threat that had consumed entire galaxies. The threat had been defeated, but at great cost. The survivors of both species had created the dragon-human bond as a safeguard, ensuring that if such a cosmic horror ever returned, there would be beings capable of standing against it. The Emperor was not the first tyrant to threaten the galaxy, and he would not be the last. When the day of the merger ceremony arrived, representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered to witness the ritual. Dragon clans that had been enemies for millennia stood side by side with humans who had never known their own heritage. The ceremony was broadcast across the galaxy so that everyone could see what was at stake. The ritual began at dawn on the hidden moon. Jinwoo and Taemin stood in the center of the chamber, surrounded by crystals that amplified their bond. As the ceremony progressed, Jinwoo felt his consciousness expanding beyond his physical body. He could feel Taemin's thoughts and memories becoming part of his own mind. The merger was painful and terrifying. Jinwoo felt like he was dissolving into energy while simultaneously becoming more solid and real than he had ever been. His human memories mixed with dragon instincts spanning thousands of years. His individual identity stretched and changed, but somehow remained intact. When the process was complete, something new existed in the chamber. The merged being looked mostly human, but with scales that shifted color like living metal, wings that could become solid or ethereal as needed, eyes that held both human compassion and dragon wisdom. The merger had created not a monster, but a perfect synthesis of two species, working in harmony. The Emperor responded to the successful merger by revealing his true form. On the day of their scheduled battle, he was no longer recognizable as any natural species, but had become a writhing mass of stolen powers held together by pure malice. His body constantly shifted between different alien forms as the absorbed essences fought within him. The battle took place in the ancient Dragon Colosseum, a massive arena that existed in folded space, accessible from anywhere in the galaxy. The structure had been built by the first dragon civilization as a place where disputes could be settled without destroying entire worlds. Billions of beings across the galaxy watched as the merged Jinwoo and Taemin faced the Emperor in single combat. The fight ranged across multiple dimensions as both combatants used powers that bent the laws of physics. The Emperor fought with the stolen strength of entire species, while the merged being fought with the harmony that came from willing cooperation. The turning point came when other dragon-human pairs in the audience began resonating with the merged being's energy. Their bonds created a network effect that amplified everyone's abilities while simultaneously weakening the Emperor, as the dragon essence within him recognized its true source and tried to return home. Victory came not through destroying the Emperor, but through freeing the stolen power. He had accumulated the absorbed essences of countless species flowed out of his artificial form, returning to their rightful sources across the galaxy. What remained was the original being he had been before he began his conquest, a talented leader, but no longer a cosmic tyrant. With the Emperor's defeat, the Overlord Empire collapsed as subject species rose up to reclaim their freedom. The galaxy entered a new age based on cooperation rather than domination, with the merged Jinwu and Taemin serving as guides and protectors rather than rulers. The victory celebration lasted for months, as species across the galaxy discovered what freedom felt like after centuries of oppression. But Jinwu and Taemin found that winning the war was easier than building the peace that followed. Their merged form could separate when needed, but they preferred to remain united, serving as a living symbol of what different species could accomplish working together. The hardest part of creating the new galactic order was convincing people that they did not want to become the next emperor. Many worlds offered to make them absolute rulers, believing that benevolent dictatorship was better than the chaos of freedom. But Jinwu and Taemin had learned from the emperor's mistakes. Power that was taken by force would always corrupt the one who wielded it instead. They helped establish a galactic confederation where each world governed itself, while cooperating on issues that affected everyone. The dragon-human pairs served as mediators and protectors, traveling between worlds to solve disputes and defend against threats that were too large for any single planet to handle. The process was not perfect. There were wars and conflicts as old enemies settled scores and new nations struggled to find their place in the galaxy. Some worlds tried to recreate the Empire on a smaller scale, forcing their neighbors to choose between submission and resistance. But the network of dragon-human pairs provided a stabilizing force that prevented any single group from dominating the others. Jinwu often thought about his old life as a cargo pilot flying routine supply runs between peaceful worlds. That existence seemed incredibly boring compared to his current responsibilities, but sometimes he missed the simplicity of knowing exactly what each day would bring. Now every day brought new challenges and decisions that could affect the fate of entire civilizations. The merged being had abilities that neither Jinwu nor Taemin could have imagined. When they first met, they could travel instantly between star systems using dragon magic enhanced by human intuition. They could communicate with any species in the galaxy by sharing thoughts directly rather than relying on translation. They could even perceive threats and opportunities across multiple dimensions, allowing them to prevent conflicts before they began. But their greatest power was inspiration. People across the galaxy saw what they had accomplished and began forming their own partnerships between species that had been enemies for millennia. The dragon-human bond was unique, but the principle of cooperation and mutual respect could be applied to any relationship between different peoples. New technologies emerged from these partnerships as different species shared knowledge that had been kept secret during the Empire. Human creativity, combined with alien science, produced innovations that benefited everyone. Medical advances eliminated diseases that had plagued certain species for generations. Agricultural techniques allowed barren worlds to bloom with life. Transportation systems connected distant parts of the galaxy, making trade and cultural exchange easier than ever before. The most important change was in education. Young beings across the galaxy learned about other species not as enemies or subjects, but as potential partners and friends. Schools taught cooperation alongside competition and diplomacy alongside defense. The next generation grew up believing that diversity was a source of strength rather than a cause for fear. Jinwu and Taemin established academies where young people from different species could learn together. Some students discovered they had genetic compatibility for forming bonds similar to the dragon-human alliance. Others simply learned to appreciate differences while working toward common goals. All of them became ambassadors for the new way of thinking. When they returned home, there were still threats. To face pirates and raiders took advantage of the transition period to attack vulnerable worlds. Ancient weapons left over from previous wars occasionally activated, requiring immediate response. And somewhere in the dark spaces between galaxies, other cosmic horrors waited for signs of weakness, but each challenge was met by volunteers who chose to help rather than subjects forced to obey. The Galactic Confederation grew stronger with each crisis as different species learned to trust each other and worked together toward solutions that benefited everyone. 10 years after their first meeting, Jinwoo and Taemin returned to the crystal planet where their adventure had begun. The world had been transformed from a barren wasteland into a memorial garden where beings from across the galaxy came to remember the cost of freedom and the importance of cooperation. Standing in the restored nursery where Taemin had hatched, Jinwoo reflected on how a simple cargo run had led to the transformation of an entire galaxy. His ship had crashed, but from that disaster had come something greater than he had ever imagined. The baby dragon who had called him brother had kept his promise, and they had indeed become royalty of a sort, but their kingdom was not built on conquest or domination. It was built on the understanding that every species had something valuable to contribute, and that working together would always accomplish more than fighting alone. The galaxy was not perfect, and never would be, but it was better than it had been, and that was enough. As new dragon eggs began hatching in the memorial nursery, each one greeted by humans who had volunteered to serve as guardians and partners, Jinwoo knew that their work would continue long after he and Taemin were gone. The bond between species was stronger than any individual and would survive whatever challenges the future might bring. The simple cargo pilot and the baby dragon had become legends, but more importantly, they had become teachers, showing the galaxy that even the most unlikely partnerships could change the universe when they were built on trust, love, and the willingness to sacrifice for something greater than themselves.